Hey everybody, this is Dr. Joe Borio with this week's Health Kick, and we got off a great last week on Thursday night. We had a great health nutrition workshop at the office. Talked about health and wellness and nutrition and heart disease and cancer and a lot of topics that we share with you in our Health Kicks. For those of you that weren't there, we had about 150 people standing room only. We actually had about 175 people that showed up or more, so we had to turn away a lot of people. But for those of you that want to buy a DVD for the from the Health Kick Nutrition Workshop, certainly just email us off BorioChiropractic.com, or you can go to Dr. Borio at drborio at cnymail.com, and for $20 along with your address, we'll make sure we ship it right out to you. So won't be as good as being there, but it certainly gives you a lot of great information. So you don't miss any of that great information to help you and your family out. That being said, today I wanted to tackle or touch a topic that we talked about in the Health Kick. I'm so hyper here, I'm stuttering today. So we want to talk about cardiovascular disease. We spent some time during the nutrition workshop on it, but what I wanted to share with you is a lot of the new view of heart disease. And this was shared to me by some nutritionists and some really good friends of mine that are studying a lot on cardiovascular disease, and that is the myogenic theory of heart disease. Traditionally, through the history, really interesting, back in the early 1920s, a gentleman invented the EKG, and he actually got a patent on it, presented it to Harvard to sell them the EKG, and Harvard didn't want anything to do with it. Now, why would that be the case? Why wouldn't Harvard Medical School want to buy the EKG? Well, the reality was there was under 300,000 myocardial infarctions in the United States back in the early 1920s. So it wasn't something that they saw any use for, because people weren't dropping dead of heart attacks. So what had happened was commercial farming came into being. We started to eat a lot more processed foods, and the diet changed, the food pyramid came up. That's a whole other Health Kick topic, but that was actually designed by the United States government for economic purposes, not for wellness purposes. They viewed that they stepped back and said, hey, where's the country strong agriculture? How can we help the country out financially? So they came up with a food pyramid to help us out, and no one was really sitting on the board thinking nutrition, and it was kind of ahead of the day of nutrition. So that's kind of sad when you think about it. But that all being said, so when that dietary changed, we became a high-stress society. The nuclear family started to fall apart. By that, mom and dad were working rather than just one person working. We were living at a much faster pace. Smoking increased, and you start to look at those lifestyle changes that occurred, and heart disease went from under 3,000 to over 900,000 people a year are suffering from heart disease. Well over 700,000 people a year die from cardiovascular disease. 800,000, I think, is a new number a year. So I mean, it's gone full spectrum from virtually non-existent to something that is just off the chart. So obviously the EKG plays a major role now in the detection of heart disease. Now, that being said, what happened with Dr. Keys years ago, he came up with the idea that the reason that we're suffering from cardiovascular disease is because the arteries are being plugged or clotted, and as a result, it would narrow the opening in the artery, right? So think of a garden hose, and if you have a kink in it or something that was in that hose, what it would do is it would narrow the flow of blood, decrease the flow of nutrients and oxygen to that part of the heart muscle, and over a period of time, what would happen? The heart muscle would fail, and then the heart muscle would get disease from this constant lack of oxygen, and then the heart muscle eventually, through a great demand of oxygen and nutrients, would fail, and then you would have a heart attack. That's what causes myocardial infarction. We also talked about fatal versus heart attack. I mean, you can have a heart attack and not be fatal. 66% of all first heart attacks are fatal. So it's certainly something that's very serious, and we need to have a real clear understanding of it. So that being said, what happened is, because we thought that it was plugging of the arterial arteries that caused the heart attack, number one. Number two, we said that it was due to a clotting of the artery. Number three, we said that the clotting was the result of cholesterol. So based upon those three, now we're in this mindset, which is 100% wrong, but we're in the mindset that cholesterol causes heart disease. Cholesterol causes clotting. So let me be very clear. I know this sounds kind of crazy and it goes against the mainstream, but The clot is not cholesterol. Let me rephrase that. A very small percentage of the clot is cholesterol. The clot in your arteries, and this is true all over the artery, not just where you have a clot in the heart, is actually what they call inflammatory debris. And what that means is it's breakdown products of the cell that are diseased or dying or are failing, and the cell starts to fall apart. And as a result, it starts to clump in the arterial wall, because it's actually happening locally often at that arterial wall or somewhere down the river, if you will. So what happens is it starts to collect on the arterial wall. What the body does is it lays down a clean layer of cholesterol. If you remember some of our previous health kick videos, we talked about what cholesterol is like plaster. So it lays down a thin layer of plaster over the clot. It does it as a very good thing. It does it to protect the arterial wall. It does it to make the arteries healthier. It does it to try to help you from all that inflammatory debris or inflammatory potholes, if you will, along the arterial wall. But as years go by, this layer becomes like a layer of, I'm Italian, so I'm going to use food, lasagna. It starts to become a layer of lasagna. So you've got thin layers of cholesterol over a huge chunk of inflammatory debris. So when we attack cholesterol, what we're doing is we're actually preventing the body from doing what it's trying to do to help you, and as a result, it hasn't decreased cardiovascular disease. In fact, cardiovascular disease is on the rise, so we're using all these statin drugs, which are highly dangerous. They kill 3 to 4 times more people than they're saving. They cause severe kidney failure and liver damage. They're very toxic to the body. They prevent the body from making proper chemicals in the body, decrease the body of coenzyme Q10, which has a lot to do with cellular function and brain function. It damages the nerves of the body. It decreases brain function. These drugs are not good for the body. They're very toxic. It doesn't mean they never have a place for those people genetically that have cholesterol levels that are through the roof, 400 or 500, but they're not for the average person that has fluctuations in cholesterol. The other problem is cholesterol is not the problem. Taking your cholesterol is not a bad thing. In other words, checking it, but what it is, it's indicative of, it's like taking your body temperature. If your body temperature is supposed to be 98.6 degrees on average, and it's 103, you're not going to give it a drug, though I guess in our society we do. We're not going to give it a drug to lower the temperature. It's an indication, it's indicative of the body's immune system trying to fight off an infection. So that being said, if I see that the cholesterol is high, what I want to basically do is I want to check why would the cholesterol be high. Let's check out this guy's exercise. Let's check out this guy's diet. And it's not dietary cholesterol like we talked about before. What it is saturated fats in certain foods, processed foods that rise the cholesterol. So getting back to the whole original topic of the myogenic theory, what they're finding out is that it's actually acidosis, lactic acid, for those of you that are familiar with that term when you work out. If anybody grabbed a dumbbell or a barbell, or anyone's done any type of exercise and you start working out, you feel that burn in the muscle, like, oh my God, I get a burn. So what you do is you stop and you allow the blood to circulate through the muscle, and it pumps out that lactic acid. And that's wonderful. Well, guess what? Good news or bad news is your heart can't stop. So when your heart is strained or stressed, typically from food or stress or chemicals or exercise, what have you, it starts to build up that lactic acid in the muscle and in the circulation around the heart and the very small arteries, and it can't rest, it can't stop, so your body starts to go into acidosis, starts to affect what they call the Sodium-Potassium Pump. I know I'm getting complicated here, but what happens is the transfer of oxygen and nutrients and energy in the heart and the cellular wall makes it a very a sacrifice of the cells. So the cells start to die in an effort to sacrifice themselves, in an effort to keep the heart pumping. And as a result, this happens at a cellular level, one cell at a time. But 20, 30, 40 years later, the cellular walls have become filled with debris and cholesterol is lying over it, and then you build up a plaque. Now they realize this through digitalis, a film you guys are familiar with that. Digitalis actually relaxes the cell wall, but what it does is it actually improves the sodium-potassium pump. Digitalis is found in different plants, and guess what? Good news, if you eat a lot of plant-based foods, I'm not saying you gotta be vegan or vegetarian, but if you start adding that living food, things that we've talked about all the time, living, green, healthy food, it acts as like digitalis, if you will. It starts to help the sodium-potassium pump. It starts to relax the cell walls. It starts to relax the small tributaries around the heart, and the heart starts to actually work much better. Less what? Debris, inflammatory debris, lowers the inflammation of the body, and guess what? you don't develop heart disease. And I want to say that very clearly. You do not develop heart disease by eating that type of diet. It's absolutely phenomenal. So that being said, you want to stay away from trans fats. Hydrogenated fats are extremely inflammatory to the body. Processed foods, anything with white flour, white sugar, anything that is on a shelf life is going to be a problem. Simple general rule, spend most of your time in the first section of the grocery store, which is what? The produce department. Smoking certainly causes an increase in heart disease because it causes acidosis around the heart, leads to necrosis, death of the cell, causes plaquing. Stress, a lot of the stress that we go through actually causes different chemicals in the body, cause acidosis, Sodium-Potassium Pump, causes heart disease. So we need to decrease stress. That is what? How's that going to be helped? Greatly through exercise. It's going to be helped through proper meditation, some lifestyle changes, trying to manage your stress. All of those things, all of those effects will greatly diminish the rate of heart disease. But definitely a topic worth revisiting. Again, that is, it's the myogenic, M-Y-O-genic, G-E-N-I-C, genic theory of heart disease. And it's going to be the new rave. It's going to be the new topic that everybody's talking about. But you guys heard it first here with Dr. Joe Borio on this week's Health Kick. Listen, we're out of time. I'll certainly notify you when we're going to have our next nutrition talk. Ensure that if you want a copy of it, make sure you contact the office and we'll kick you out a DVD for $20. In the meantime, make sure you guys are getting checked and your nervous system getting checked and your family's getting checked. That means you, your mother, your father, your grandfather, your grandkids, your cousins, the babies, everyone you know needs a proper nerve supply. Brain needs to communicate to the body. Body needs to communicate to the brain. Healthy is straight, straight is healthy. This has been Dr. Joe Borio with this week's Health Kick. Have a great week. Talk to you guys next week.